I think one of the biggest struggles for me is being in Oklahoma by myself. I've been here almost 6 years, and I've had to work multiple jobs, like odd jobs. I've had to walk to work in rain, snow, sleet, really hot weather, wearing very professional clothes. So it's always been a struggle, but God has always gotten me through it. James Church for me was kind of, I won't say a savior because like there's only one, but it was a saving grace that God put in my life. Before I found James Church, every Sunday I went to a different church, and it's a little exhausting. You're never really sure how to worship, or you don't know the people, you're unaware of the atmosphere, you don't know the pastor or the preaching style. I've been to so many denominations, I can tell you just about anything there is, but I love the people, and I love the love that they gave me so much that I stayed, and I think of James as my home. This church family has shown me a lot about trusting in God's promises, whether it's, someone praying with me or someone texting me and just checking up on me. God has shown up through so many different people here, through so many different avenues and outlets, whether it's just a song that they sing on Sunday, and I think that God had picked it out for me. This church is family. With school, there's the thing, after a few weeks, at the beginning of the year, there's a period where everything has to be paid off. And it seemed like every year, more and more money was left that needed to be paid off. So I would panic and pray and fast and be like, Lord, what are you doing? You told me to come, it's really expensive. And then because of grades or because of like recommendations, there was always a moment where they'd be like, oh, we found another scholarship. And God would show up like out of nowhere. I've gone through quite a lot in my life, but one thing has always been constant. It's God. Church, I'm here to tell you today, I'm a living witness. You need to trust in God's promises.
Appreciate Crystal sharing that with us. Each week we're going to have some different testimony, because you don't just need to hear from me about these things. These are what make us who we are. And so if you're new with us, this is our core values series, in which we're just kind of telling you about the things that we think are hugely important, the things we're going to prioritize, the things we're going to continually focus on in every aspect of our ministry. I've got a couple of guys on stage with me this morning. We've got one more that's going to join us via video. But here's what we want to do today. As we get a little further into this series, if you weren't with us last week, we just said that this idea of different, it's just living a life that demands explanation. That the things we do, how we handle adversity, how we handle victories, requires an explanation, because we do it differently, because all of it is trusting in God's promises. The core value, we said it this way: we believe God is a promise maker and a promise keeper. So we will live our lives and we will build our church trusting God's word. You'll notice in front of us is this big pile of rocks, and the verse I read from Exodus 6 during communion thoughts, and then again in Joshua 4, which we'll talk about throughout this series, and we've talked about throughout our class on Sunday morning, is this idea that God told him. He says, as you cross over, as I deliver you, get some stones. Get them out of the river and build a monument, build a reminder, build something that we can focus on and remind ourselves of how far God's taken us. So today, what I've done is I've got some voices of leadership past and present, and we're going to talk about that today. We're just going to talk about where God has taken us, where he's brought us from, and where he's brought us to. So just off the top, introduce yourselves. Kind of tell a little bit about your role here and how long, and we'll go from there. Start with you down there on the end.
All right. I'm Steve Wilson. My wife Debbie and I and our 3 kids came to Jinx in the early 90s. I'm not real good with exact dates. And our daughter Summer and her husband Ben and their kids Evelyn and Kerrigan attend Jinx with us. and our other children live out of town, but Taylor happens to be here visiting with us today, and I currently serve as an elder here.
And my name is Steve Parkhurst, and I served as an elder here for about 16 years, terminating, when did I end? I don't know, it was sometime in the early 2000s. Maybe.
Oh, I love that we're a church full of accountants and nobody's good with numbers. It's,
I remember that was 16 years.
There you go. That's the important part. And then who couldn't be with us today, but was kind enough to let us video his answers and kind of join in via video is former minister here, Tracy Ellis. And so you'll be hearing a little bit from him. He was the minister here for about 23 years, and that's a long time. In minister world, that's eternity. And so he was kind enough to also participate in our panel today, but due to some family obligations, couldn't be in the room, so he'll be on video with us a little bit later. So, all right, so just kind of getting into some of the things that we've talked about with you guys over the last few weeks is just talk to the folks about some things that you want to celebrate. Celebration is a huge part of who we are. We want to celebrate the good. We want to celebrate God and what He's doing. So we'll start with you, Parkhurst. You get to start. Just tell us a little bit about something happening or has happened or is going to happen in the Jinx Church family that you're really excited about and want to celebrate.
Well, I can celebrate past promises kept. I remember that this ministry here, this church here, was a growing, vibrant church. My role in church ministry began about the same time Tracy came on board, and sometimes it was deliriously exciting to be here. This was a very vibrant ministry, and what drew me into ministry was the fact that I grew up in a relatively narrow church dogma, if you will, and I rebelled against that. I stopped going to church, and it was people from this place who heard about me and came to my house and pulled me back in. They said whatever they had to say to get me back in here, and they succeeded. I came into leadership because there were other people in leadership who believed, as I did, that the Church of Christ to survive had to become more inclusive and more. We had an opportunity to unify the Lord's work in Jinx. And we prayed about that. We asked for more room because we began to outgrow this place. And there were some remarkable events that had nothing to do with what we did that enabled us to obtain 105 acres in South Jinx, right smack dab in the middle of the target for the growth south of Jinx. And I spent about 8 years in the real estate and development business, and I don't ever remember, I've done a lot of real estate transactions, I don't ever remember one where the obstacles that are in every real estate transaction were swept aside so easily. We had seed money from a dear church member who believed in us and believed in our ministry, so we had some seed money to work with, but we certainly couldn't afford 105 acres. So God brought forth a developer who bought 60 of these 105 acres for enough money for us to own the land in his way instead of in our way. And I think Arlen was in leadership at that time, and I think he will bear out that this was such a gift from God. we were able to obtain that property and begin a ministry that was, in our view, in following God's calling to unify God's church in Jinx. And we got to a point to where we had a relationship with the church in this building. We knew the ministers. We loved the ministers. We found numerous like thinking. We believed the same things. We had different names, but we worshiped the same God. We believed in all important areas. We believed the same. And so we believe that God was leading us to become a merged church, a community church. And that's the road that we started down. Unfortunately, we as a church weren't ready to do that. And that didn't happen. But the good news is that God had put other opportunities out that I think Steve can talk to more accurately than I can, because at that point I took a vacation from organized religion. And when I came back from that vacation, there were these great leaders, of which Steve represents this morning, that are following in God's calling and God's promises. And I'm really excited about the story that continues here at Jinx. This is a very special place to me and to, I know, all of you. And I think it's time for me to stop talking right now.
Yeah, what I love about this is, hearing you talk, you've referenced a number of the different core values. The unity, the idea that we're going to pursue uncommon unity, and the kingdom, living kingdom mentality. The idea that it's bigger than just our family here. And I love that God's faithfulness, that God's promise has seen us through even maybe some things that weren't realized then. But now we're starting to see some of that. We're starting to see the fulfillment of some of those promises. So yeah, I think that's well worth celebrating. What about you?
Well, I think I would celebrate the faithfulness of Jinx. I've really liked the study recently of Joshua, because I like the story not just of Joshua, but of the Israelites, the Old Testament, and kind of the constant struggle with following God and being distant from God. And I feel that kind of reflects our lives and sometimes our church life too. I think it's been reflected in our family's journey, a little bit of ebb and flow with our walk with God. And right now I celebrate that He's brought us to a place where we can focus on reaching the community around us rather than focus on making debt payments. We had struggled, we had difficulties, and there weren't as many of us around, and those debt payments were hurting us. We believe in Christian unity, and we prayed, in spite of our financial issues, we prayed that God would use that building to His glory. And I believe He answered that prayer when He brought the church into our lives. They worked with us. They wanted to work with us. They were great. They, like us, were willing to do things in God's time. And I believe it has positioned both of us to really impact the community here in Jinx.
Yeah, so that's what it's all about. We may not look the same, we may not go by the same name, but the fact that we can celebrate God's activity regardless of our differences is a huge, huge thing. Let's let Tracy talk to us for a little bit. He's a preacher, so we had to put him on film so we could edit down so that you didn't have to go to lunch. Make sure you're out for lunch in time. But let's see what Tracy had to say when he was asked the same question.
First of all, I love the question, and I love the idea of celebrating. I'm a guy that thinks that a party needs to happen the majority of the time. And so what we celebrate, what we lean into, These are the promises, the good things that God is consistently doing. I was thinking through Scripture of how many times this idea of God doing something new, it just is repeated throughout so many of the stories that we hold dear, that we're a new creation in Christ. The Apostle Paul, St. Paul, he was good at championing the fact that God's not finished with you yet. There's something new that's going to happen within you. There's a new song to be sung, that the best songs have yet to be written. Artists are continuing to be born day by day that will lead us in worship before the throne of God. There's a new heaven and a new earth. There's a very beautiful promise. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but it sounds like a celebration. As I was thinking about that newness, the scripture that he renews or makes new every morning came to mind, and so I looked up Lamentations 3. I think it's beautiful. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And so the prophet wrapped the love of God and the mercy of God together and said, this is always happening. It's new. It's new for you personally. And certainly what's true for us individually is borne out among us collectively as well.
Yeah, so the idea of new is important. But one of the things Joshua did as he brought the people out was they gathered the stones. They made the remembrances. They made these things that they could look back as they experienced new and new blessing. They never wanted to forget the old either. So you guys have done a little bit of this, but Steve Wilson, we'll start with you. Looking back, right? Is there a promise? Is there something, an event, a time, a story you can remember that really you held on to and that you've held on through and God's been faithful to?
Well, I was thinking a lot about this question on what promises we've seen him fulfill, and probably we don't have time to cover all of that. To me, some of the most important things are some of the people he has brought to us, and oftentimes as examples to us. And one of the people that he brought to us that I think has been really meaningful to me is Ron Babbitt. Now, Ron's not here on Sundays. He leads the Contact Church, for those who don't know him. And he's a tremendous servant. He has an ability to reach out to people that I envy. I don't have. But, and reaching out to people who are different and people who are struggling. And we were blessed with the ability to help Ron get started here in Tulsa when he moved from St. Louis. And so I thought that was actually a gift from God to bring Ron. Steve DeLoach and his short mission to Guyana 20 some odd years ago that continues to this day. And I haven't been down there, but from talking to the people who have, I believe that they're as impacted as the people of Guyana are. But it is a chance for us to reach out. So again, I think that bringing us the right people, and then today, I look at the staff we now have, I look at their hearts, their desires, the desires of the elders, and I think God is fulfilling promises with bringing this group of people together. We've been through some dark times over the past year or two, but God walks with us as we walk with Him. I feel that we're in something of a crossing the Jordan moment, though we did not come as conquerors. We have moved as we feel we were guided by God, and we aspire to follow Him and show Him to this community.
I love that. You could be a preacher with a good line like that. I like that. Yeah, that we're at this Jordan moment, and we are crossing into something great. And I hope and pray, especially if you're new to the Jeeks family, that you really feel that you feel maybe some energy, some excitement. The sky's the limit for us, and we're really excited about where God is leading us. But looking back and remembering is a powerful thing. So let's hear from Tracy and see what he remembered, what he wanted to look back at, and it'll buy you a little more time to rest.
Well, it makes me smile. I think that's probably the first thing, which gives a really good indication of our time with this beautiful family. Our journey started when we were fairly young. I was barely 30, I guess, when we donned the doorsteps of the facility here. Our daughters were very small and at a place of needing to be spiritually cared for and nurtured by so many people. And so I look back at that, and it just makes me smile, because this is where history has been lived out in community together. And we have such incredible fond memories of that. I think one of the greatest promises of God that I hang on to, I think that we all perhaps do, is in the phrase, "I will never leave you, I will never forsake you." I think Jesus said, "I'll be with you always." And that promise is so affirming that regardless of what I go through in my personal life, what we go through, God is always present. It may not be pleasant, and it could even be painful, but it doesn't mean that God is not present. He is with us, and we can lean into that. We can, that truth and understanding that He moves us through those places. He joins us in the celebration, but if it is painful, He extends a hand. He lifts us up, and He does that to us individually. And then when I think of the church collectively, I get even more excited, because the combination of all of us together and what's happening when God moves, it is so significant. So maybe I'm in a good place, and maybe you're not in such a good place. And then tomorrow, maybe you're in a good place, and maybe I'm not. And we see God being faithful to His promise. "I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you." God is always in the process of raising up new leadership. When we got here, we were young and excited and filled with enthusiasm, much like Dave, much like you and David and Logan. I'd love to have been as young as Logan, regardless. But seriously, that whole idea that God is always doing something new and raising up new leadership that we can believe in, that we can trust, that we can follow, that we can all together be a collective voice in watching something significant happen. For us personally, it saw our children through the young ages, the elementary school years, the middle school years, the high school years, where relationships were formed, life relationships were formed and are still in existence to this day. That's as beautiful as it gets. For us, for the Ellises, that's a promise that we'll forever hang on to. And it's something that we are incredibly indebted to. And it came out of what's happening in this family. And it's happening here. It's happening now.
Yeah. And as a new minister coming in, just to have the support, to have the love, to have the continued vision from leaders past to leaders present, and that support is really overwhelming. And what a great proof of God's faithfulness. That it's not about us, it's not about who's in a specific role, but that God sustains and that God fulfills. So I love that. Steve, tell us, looking back, what is it for you? What promises have you held on to through some of the seasons that you've mentioned today?
Well, I think the most prominent promise that has seen fulfillment all the way through my ministry years is that God always raises up people to do His ministry. It's remarkable how a group of ordinary men can come together and do extraordinary things through their faith and through God's blessing. And that is an extraordinary thing to experience, right? It is. And that was a wonderful time in my life. It was wonderful, and it was terrible, and it was built me up, and it broke me down, and all through that, God's promises prevail because we're here today. This is a continuation of the journey that God has for this church. I believe very strongly that this is a special place in the kingdom, and that our leadership today, Dave and David and these wonderful elders that we have, and I have total faith in you guys. I love you guys. That is overwhelming to me. That is God's promised to do His will through this body. And this is a very blessed place. And I'm very happy to be here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's good to hear, right? That you're loved. Yeah. Anytime an elder hears their love, that's a good day. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take a little break from us talking. We're gonna go back and we're gonna sing an old hymn. Like, you can't talk about looking back without going back musically as well. So we're gonna go back and sing "Come Thou Fount." So it even sounds like an old hymn, right? But in there's a line that says, "Here I raise my Ebenezer." And when I was a kid, I thought they were talking about Scrooge. But later in life, I found out that it was talking about a big pile of rocks. And the idea that we raise up a remembrance, and we raise up this idea that God has gotten us this far. And so, won't you just join as Logan and Craig lead us in just singing "Come Thou Fount," and we'll remember and reflect back for just a little bit. Amen. So what you guys may or may not have been able to hear is this guy's got a pretty good singing voice, right? He did a great Jesus a few weeks ago, if you were with us for that. But he sings pretty good, doesn't he? Yeah, good. I'm glad my mic was way down there. And yeah, let him come through. So yeah, Ebenezer is all about looking back and remembering, but not so that we can stay in the past. The idea is that we would then look to the future, move to the future. The crossing of the Jordan was not, hey, we've arrived. It was, look where God is taking us next. So one of the things we want to do today also is look to the future and look to where God is taking us and what He has planned for us, and some of those promises we can hold on to moving forward. So we'll start with what Tracy had to say, and then we'll come back to these guys here on stage today.
Well, once again, I love this idea of moving forward. I think standing still is for sissies. And I hope that's not offensive in a spiritual kind of way. We should be moving forward. There is a journey ahead of us. God invited Abraham to this tireless journey. I mean, there are so many different stations on his journey, and we are at various places on the journey. I live with this idea that there is a very good God. There's a God who is so good, filled with goodness, and He breathed life into us, and almost with this Cheshire grin looked at us and said, very good. And then He extended the invitation for us to join hands, walk throughout all of creation, and seek to do something good. So every single day, if I think of the promise of God and even the calling of God, it's just do something good today. And if it can be aimed towards someone, because God's all about people, the good that comes from that is multiplied over and over, time and time again. So it's really this idea of keeping it so simple, so doable, so livable, and then the net result is that we are so incredibly blessed. Every time I do something good for someone else, it comes back to me.
Two things about that. He asked that we cut out the standing stills for sissies line. I said, no way. That's too good, and we're keeping that. The other thing is kind of what he ended with, this idea of it's really simple, that when we do what God's called us to do, good things happen. Doesn't mean life's always going to be easy, but it means we're doing something right, and God blesses that. And that goes in with our showing visible love value. So I love his perspective on that one there. Steve Wilson, tell us a little bit moving forward, looking to the future. What are you holding on to? What promises of God are you looking for?
I'm holding on to the promise that He will guide us and protect us. I want us to stay in a close relationship with Him. And sometimes it's a struggle. I guess I'll confess some of my own weaknesses here.
Elder struggle? Really?
I know that I feel better, happier, more content when I feel close to God. But I still have to work at staying close. I believe Satan is constantly trying to create distance between us. And sometimes staying close to God and being constantly in a prayerful relationship, and here's where I'm confessing, to me is a lot like eating healthy. I know it's good for me. I know I will feel better, but there are constant temptations bombarding me, particularly if you're married to Debbie. And they pull me away, and then I have to reflect and remember even Paul, even an apostle in Romans, fought this battle of not doing what he wanted to do and doing what he didn't want to do. And I remember that, and I'm thankful that that's in there, because that can give me courage when I feel distant.
Steve Parkhurst, what about you? What are you holding on to? What are you excited about celebrating, trusting God for moving forward in the future?
Well, I'm confident and I trust God that I am His. And that as long as His Spirit dwells in me, as long as I make room in my heart for His Spirit, that I will continue to be His. I'm not a young guy. I just turned 70 not too long ago. And I know Linda never thought she'd be married to a 70-year-old man. And I'm sorry. But as I age, your perspective changes. And I believe that and hold on to the promise that He will give me ways to serve Him that is not in the eldership.
You know, I think it's so powerful about what these guys have shared is just their honesty, that it's not easy, that there's seasons that we're going to struggle, that men who have held what I consider to be the most respectful position there is, the willingness to take on that burden and just all the emotion and spiritual turmoil that it puts you through to be an elder. And yet they're still honest enough to say at 70 years old and at 35 years old, right? Let's go with that. Yeah. See, terrible with numbers. They still struggle. And we don't expect to be a church of perfect people. What we expect is to be a people that trust that we're still God's. And He's still working on us. And He's still moving. So, just to kind of wrap this up as we kind of shift gears and kind of turn, what advice, anything else you want to share with us? Any advice, anything that maybe somebody who wants to trust God's promises more, just bring us home. What do you want to share with us as we kind of close out today?
In a short statement, is don't be afraid. Step out. Try to recognize God's will. And don't be afraid to step out and do something.
Making bold moves. Do you hear it? Even without any plan or prep, I didn't tell these guys what to say. They've managed to go through all of our core values. These aren't things we just came up with last week. These are things that have been part of who Jinx Church is. We're just putting a name on it. We're putting a label on it. We're just helping you be able to digest it and begin to make it a part of your vocabulary and part of your culture in your social network. So, all right, Steve Wilson, what do you got for us?
Well, I'm excited about the future here. I'm excited about reaching our community. I'm excited about developing closer relationships with other churches in our community and working towards the Christian unity that we talk about. It's my prayer, my desire to see the entire Christian community working together to serve those around us. And I'm excited about becoming that diverse group of people you talked to us about last week. And my advice is to stay in the Word, relate to the stories, relate to the things that God has told us. Even those we admire as God's greatest servants lost their way from time to time, and He will not forsake us.
All right, one last time, let's hear from Tracy and see what he's got for us advice.
You know, I think that, and what I know with certainty, that Jinx Church as a family has been bathed in prayer since its very humble beginnings in a 2-story house down in what I love to refer to as old school Jinx. These are a people who have come together, and there has always been this beautiful spirit of prayer, bathed in prayer, through the good times, through the challenging times, through every single season. Because whatever's happening to us at an individual level is surely happening to us collectively as well. And so if I could move us in the direction of something to continue to practice and hang on to, it would be leaning into prayer and understanding that prayer may not give me everything that I want or even everything that I necessarily think that I need, but it continues to connect me humbly to a God who is present, to a God who does care, and He does that consistently. And then I also think that the belief that we hold in the resurrection, we were talking about this earlier, the belief that we hold in the resurrection promise, it's more than an event, it is more than a story, it's more than a holiday to celebrate, it's maybe even more than just a miracle, but it is the belief in God's eternal and symbolic promise, His message that all things are made new. The resurrection is happening all of the time. It happens within each of us. I get to a place where I'm not sure that, I can go on, and yet God resurrects something that is held with great promise, something that is new and something that is beautiful. Even as a church, the resurrection promise for us collectively is lived out day by day. And so each one of us, as we bring both prayer and this understanding that God is always resurrecting, He is always breathing life into us, there's something very beautiful about that.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and let these guys exit off the stage. We're going to invite those of us who are going to lead us in our closing song to go ahead and start coming up. But we're going to ask you guys if you'll all just go ahead and stand and get ready to sing. We're going to sing a song you don't know. You might know it if you listen to the radio a little bit, but it may be a song that's unfamiliar, but I want you to listen to the words. Because in this song, Do It Again, it's a prayer. It's a cry out to God that God would come and do again what He's done, that He would continue to be faithful. He would continue to lead us and guide us as we hold on to His promises. So what I want to do is I just want to challenge you, wherever you're at today, that you would invite God in to come and lead you to take your next step with Him. Maybe your next step is getting more involved. Maybe your next step is moving from involved into a place of leadership. And you need to start leading some of these ministries, leading some of these opportunities to serve and reach our community. Or maybe it's giving, or maybe it's just supporting and encouraging. Whatever your next step is, let this be a time when you say, God, You've always been faithful. You've always seen me through. Would you just do it again? Let me pray over you and then I'll lead us in the song. Heavenly Father, today we just ask that you'll move in our hearts. Don't let us be complacent. Don't let us, as Tracy said, God, standing still is persistence. And make us bold, make us brave, make us men and women who passionately pursue your plan for our life. That plan may come with some persecution, may come with some obstacles. But God, give us a heart that is always holding to your promises, that is always faithful to your word, and where we're reminded time and time again that you move, that you change, that you lead. So God, today we invite you into this place, we invite you into this moment to come and do it again. In Jesus' name.